Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the chattering teacup.
Hello.
And here with us, journalist and young adult author Andreina Cordani. Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Hello, Edith and teacup.
Nice to see you again, because we have to tell our listeners we met at Crimefest last year.
Yeah, we did. Had a brilliant time.
Yeah, it was a great time, great evening. And
Definitely.
You were there because the books you write, your young adult novels, they are thrilling.
Yeah. They are what, sorry?
They are thrilling.
They are thrilling. I hope they are. Thrilling thrillers.
Yes, they are. The first one was The Girl Who in 2021. And the new one, Dead Lucky, came out in January 2022.
Yeah, it's actually my book birthday as we record, the day that we're recording this. So it came out exactly a year today.
See, and it takes place in the world of influencers. And I have to tell you, it is, let's say, disconcerting, if not downright scary, to be honest.
Yay!
What you wrote.
2 good words, thank you.
It was meant to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's a rom-com.
Yeah, and before we started the recording, I said there were quite a lot of twists and turns, and it was a fantastic read.
Oh, thank you.
And tell us, why and how did you came up with the idea of letting it take place in the world of influencers?
So the first book that I wrote, The Girl Who, I started writing it a really long time ago because I was trying to write it alongside having a full-time job. And it features 2 girls, one of whom is reluctantly famous because her mother and sister were killed in front of her when she was younger. And so she's a witness to this, and it makes her very well known in the media, and she becomes a campaigner, etc. So she's famous for the wrong reasons, doesn't want to be famous. And then she ends up with a stepsister who is desperate to be famous and is quite an attention seeker and, you know, makes no bones about it. I want to be well known. I want people to know my name. And for a long time, I was trying to think of, I knew that she wanted to be famous. I was trying to think of ways for her to be famous. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, she doesn't seem the type to want to go on Love Island or anything like that. So I couldn't think of any way. And she didn't strike me as, she was very dramatic, but not like the most amazing actor. Mm-hmm. So I was sort of humming and hawing about this for ages, and then realised, and then basically sort of ran into an influencer on the beach down here in Sandbanks, mm-hmm. Being mobbed by tweens who were all taking selfies with him. And I was like, that's exactly what I need. And so I made her an aspiring influencer. At the time, the most popular platform was YouTube. So she was a YouTuber. She was trying to run her own channel secretly from her bedroom. And while I was doing this, I just became more and more interested in the pressures because I watched a lot of YouTubers, mm-hmm. and I became more interested in the pressures on young people who are trying to do this and who are doing it successfully. Because basically people were getting crazy famous and crazy rich and crazy successful in a very short space of time. So they were 19 and they were having money thrown at them to endorse this, endorse that, endorse this. And at the same time, they were under pressure to kind of carry on being the person they were when they started it. So, you know, if you start off at 15 and you're a prankster and you like playing practical jokes and, you know, doing silly things and whatever, then that is what you are stuck with. And when you're sort of 23 or something, you're still having to behave like you're 15. And, you know, how do you navigate your way around that? How do you figure out who you are when everyone is looking at you and they think they know who you are? Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's a big emotional situation. And let's put some murder in too. Why not?
And you started off the book with the murder. I mean, it starts quite gruesome.
Yeah, the murder happens in the first line, which that was always the first line. It was the first thing I wrote about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is definitely staying. And then we backtrack from that a little bit, but yeah, it's sort of, you know, a lot of people have said it grabbed them from the first page, which is exactly obviously what it's intended to do.
It does.
And it's also just, you know, just really brings home the point I'm making, which is like this guy is killed on camera. So, you know, for those of you listening that haven't read it, it's about, an influencer who is murdered on camera. Well, somebody murders him while he's filming, and then they upload the video. And so, yes, I was basically thinking about what would happen if that happened, and the whole world would go crazy, and the mainstream media would go crazy at it, and then the fans would really whip themselves into a frenzy. And so, you know, I had a lot of fun coming up with a scenario where that would happen.
And like I said, quite a few twists and turns I didn't see coming, to be honest.
Oh, good.
I'm honest here. I didn't really. I was, interesting. Sure. She got me there. And I mean, your influencer, Xav, he's the one who got murdered.
Yes.
But he didn't start out alone. I mean, there was this group of friends, more or less, people he met at school. And it, like you said before, it started out, or it usually starts out like fun. You said pranksters and doing something stupid or funny. And then from there, it developed.
And to become kind of business partners in the end.
Yeah.
Well, because they have to work together.
Frenemies is what they call them.
Because they separate off. They start this one channel together as a gang, and it works very well. And they start to go a little bit viral when they're still at school. But then an incident happens, which means they have to stop making videos on the channel, but they all go off and start making their own. And then they become successful in their own right. And then, you know, so there's two timelines. There's a timeline of when they're 15 and they're starting out. And then there's another timeline later on, which is when the murder happens, when they're 19. And they're seemingly on top of the world, but they're all slightly cracking under the pressure because they've been living this life for a while. And they're all being pulled in very different directions.
Would you say that Maxine, she's one of the group, is she your main character? Is she the hero of the story in the end? Somehow?
I think Maxine is. I think obviously there's also the narration from Sam, which is my flashback character.
Yep.
The 2 points of view are, we have Maxine in the present day. Maxine is stuck in a position where she's trying to be friends with all her old school friends and all the people she started the channel with. She's trying to stay like everyone's friend, but they're all kind of arguing with each other and splitting up with each other. And she's trying to be diplomatic. And then Xav, the murder victim, is always like sending her video messages, moaning and pouring his heart out and sharing all his grief and everything. But at the same time, he's behaving like a complete massive tool in public. So she's sort of in this position where people are asking her to condemn him because his behavior is really appalling. But she also knows that there's more to it than that, but she can't say. So, and then obviously he's murdered. So Maxine is in that position. And then my flashback character is Sam, who basically sits on the sidelines watching enviously, secretly wants to be an influencer, doesn't really there's so many personal things going on that, you know, it's not really an option. And then these guys come along and they just make it look really easy, which Sam is very frustrating. And then Sam gets very bitter.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
But on the other hand, Sam is more or less allowed to develop.
Because they're not in front of a camera, Sam's an interesting character.
Exactly.
Sam has a lot of issues.
Yeah, exactly. Because not just Sam, also the others, but Sam tries to... Sam is an interesting character indeed, and a character who wants to fit in, also wants to blend with the background, because like you said, because of the issues at home, family
it's
issues.
Like, look at me, don't look at me.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Can't quite decide.
Yeah, and very successful at that. And
at doing that,
yeah, I mean, on the surface, the others seem more carefree, let's put it that way. But the further you get in the book and the more you learn about their past, you realize, like I said, Seth, he seems like a villain. But on the other hand, when you learn about the past, what was going on in his family, you know where he's coming from.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of my friends, my writing friends, really enjoy writing an out-and-out villain who's just evil, evil, evil. But I really like writing about people who do evil things but aren't necessarily evil, if you know what I mean. That have had situations or circumstances that have made them like that. So not to make excuses for them, but just to make them human.
Yeah, it's more realistic that way.
More layered also. His personality is more layered than that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've spoken to readers who said, you know, God, I can't stand Zav. And then quite a few people who say, I feel really sorry for him. So it's quite sort of, I don't know. I want the readers to make up their own minds about it. I don't mind if they love him or hate him, but he's an interesting character to write and to read about. And Zav was actually one of the easiest ones in a way, that he just sprang off of the page.
And I mean, also Maxine, I mean, there's more to her than just being an influencer. I mean, the way she talks about herself, when she reflects about herself, that's also kind of a way of putting herself down, because that's what everyone else tells her.
Yeah.
But in reality, she's emphatic. People trust her, tell her their stories, and she's not that stupid.
No. So, yeah, at the beginning of the book, she has a reputation for being stupid and ditzy, and, you know, she's always making videos where she falls over by accident or something goes wrong, and that's what they like. That's what her viewers like. And, you know, her mum is part of her kind of team now. Yeah. And she's like, just go with it. And she's kind of thinking, well, yeah, I must be stupid. Everybody says I'm stupid, so I must be. And then she's almost kind of forced to figure out this mystery. Yeah. So, you know, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that she, you know, realizes she's not as stupid as she thought she was.
Exactly. And there's also Lenny and Andy. They're also part of the group. Yeah. I mean, Lenny, or Eleanor, as her real name is, she's from a middle-class family. Her parents are well off, not rich, like Andy's, but they're also part of this group, and they enjoy doing pranks. Yeah. Or being more than just boring, in Lenny's case.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lenny becomes like a beauty influencer, and I became quite fascinated with the beauty influencers when I was doing my research and watching YouTube, because just they have an additional pressure on them in a way. And it is changing a little bit now, but when I was watching these YouTubers back in, you know, in lockdown or whatever, or before lockdown, like there was just pressure on them to have a really strong look and to like contour your face really heavily. So you just basically got a mask on and to like be constantly changing the color of your hair and to have these crazy nails, and you end up kind of looking beautiful, but otherworldly. And that's kind of, you know, not quite, I want to say not quite human. I don't mean it in a bad way, but I just mean you don't look like you could just walk down the street like that. Although a lot of people do these days. But it's just as like a really striking look. And the idea of like having to live in that shell the whole time, and, you know, to like get up in the morning and have to do all this stuff to your face and your hair and your nails. I'm low maintenance. I'm quite low maintenance. So it's quite interesting to get into that.
Low maintenance. Tell me about it. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I brush my hair. Yeah. You know, that's about it really. Yeah. So yeah, that was interesting to look into. And it was like, you know, wearing the skin of a character that that sounds gross. Yeah. Getting under the skin of a character. That sounds much better.
You mentioned in the afterword of your book that you spoke to quite a few real influencers to get the feel.
To some influencers.
Okay. Yeah. To get a feel of the language, what I suppose also what drives them, why they do it, and what did you find out which you didn't put in your book?
Well, one thing I didn't put in my book really was that most influencers would not give me the time of day. I mean, mainly because it makes me look not very good. I was kind of used to, coming from a background in magazines, I was kind of used to going, you know, I mean, it's not like I could suddenly like knock on a movie star's door and say like, hey, George Clooney, do you want to give me an interview? But, you know, I was used to being able to phone up and say, I'm from Cosmo. I'd really like a 10-minute chat to get some background. I'm writing an article about influencers, blah, blah, blah. And having people go, yeah, sure. Or else, no, I haven't got time. Yep. But, you know, I emailed like dozens and dozens of influencers and dozens of influencing agents. And I got nothing, pretty much. And the only chats I did get were obtained through friends of friends. And I was really, really grateful to those people because they did help me out. But when I spoke to them about it, I said, look, I've had real trouble getting anyone to talk to me. And they said, well, yeah, for the most part, if you're not offering them anything, they won't talk to you. And that's very different to my experience as a journalist, where people just want to talk to you because they're interested and they might want to be in a magazine. Whereas these guys don't really care about being in a magazine. They've got, they're famous enough that they want to be, and they're getting the things they want to get. And mostly they're paid for everything they do, which wouldn't that be nice?
Yep, absolutely. That would be wonderful, to be honest.
Paid,
But there's also, like you said before, there's also a lot of pressure. I mean, they're quite young. In this case, we have people, the whole group, they went to school and they dropped out of school. And they have lots of money, freebies. Maxine, they got this apartment where she lives with her mother and all these things. She gets offered by the companies she has to advertise. But the downside, like you said, is they have to work for it also. And it's not just given to them. They have to promote things. They have to make videos, more than one every day.
They have to decide whether they like the thing or not, and to promote it or not. And, I probably didn't look too deeply into that because I wanted Maxine to be very keen and very I don't want to let down. I don't want to, be dishonest. And she's very scrupulous and everything about, never plugging anything that she doesn't like. But I think there's a lot of people that plug things they don't like. But yeah, the fun thing I had writing about was she gets her own line of stationery. So she's on the verge of going into the big time. So rather than, just selling T-shirts off of her website, she's actually going to have pencil cases and pencils and pens and notebooks in, I don't know, W.H. Smith's or something like that. And she's really excited about it.
Yeah.
And then she gets very, more and more disappointed when she sees the quality of what she's going to be asked to sell and how much the prices are. And she has to sort of decide, do I say something? And, it goes in again with that feeling stupid. People are saying, never mind, dear, just sign this, just pose with this pencil.
We know what's best for you.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you underestimate it, it's sometimes helpful.
Yeah.
And adolescence is usually quite a difficult time for people anyway. But I guess it's made much more difficult if you also are working as an influencer and you have to stay the way you are.
Yeah. Our brains aren't fully formed or fully developed until we're 25 years old. So, I mean, I think mine is still developing. Actually, I think it's just peaked and it's on its way down now. But yeah, that's probably why I'm hitting adolescence again. I don't know. No, that's not true. That's not true. But you don't know who you are fully. You know bits. You might know, I don't know, I like tennis, or I'm gay, or I love thrillers, or you know things that you like, but you don't know everything you like. You don't know everything you want to be. Even after you're 25, to be honest, I'm still figuring it out. So,
And do you know or have any idea how big this business is amongst children and adolescents?
I think it's millions, especially if you're a Kardashian, that's in a completely different league, obviously. I think it's changing because of lockdown and because of TikTok. So TikTok blew up completely over lockdown. People weren't really going to YouTube anymore. They were going to TikTok. They were, scrolling through, and the sort of content they were getting was very different. So, on YouTube, people were liking the sort of Mr. Beast type people who were like, they're funny and they're pranky and everything. Or there were the beauty influencers, like I say, and it's like a 45-minute video about I went out and chose some makeup from Superdrug. But in TikTok, it's like 2 seconds, I'm in Superdrug, whoop, whoop, there we are. So the sort of thing that you could do you can make longer videos in TikTok now, but back then it was really, they were very short back in sort of 2020. So, and the kind of things like the lip syncing, the use of music, that sort of thing just changed what kids were looking at, or young people were looking at as well. So I actually think that if Maxine was making videos now, they would be very different to the videos that I had her making in Dead Lucky. And that was like 18 months ago.
It's changing fast.
Yeah, it's changing really fast, definitely.
And is it, I mean, of course it's true that there lurks a lot of danger out there in the digital world. I mean, it's difficult, I suppose, for parents to get it right. I mean, and this kind of business, what is it? What can parents do to protect their children?
I guess
sorry, go on.
I think the parents are also seduced by the money the children can earn.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly sort of looked at that with the mum character in mind. That she was just she got herself slightly over-focused on that, and that actually meant she took her eye off the ball, and Maxine was really struggling.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've spoken to a couple of parents of influencers, and like the main tip that they say is to keep involved. So obviously teenagers don't want parents breathing down their necks all the time, what you're looking at, what you're viewing, etc. But to keep talking about them, about what they've seen, maybe join the app yourself, especially if it's something like TikTok, just join the app yourself so you can see what's on it, talk to them about it, and just keep the door of communication open. And the other thing, like I spoke to a mother of a quite successful TikToker, and she was saying just the rule was don't put anything out there that you wouldn't want your granny to see. Because she can see it, I can get granny to work TikTok and she'll be able to see it. So just bear that in mind, when you're, if you wouldn't stand outside the house doing it, don't do it online in front of millions of people. But yes, I think it is really tricky. I've also spoken to a friend of mine whose kids just, she's not allowed on TikTok, so she just sets up another account, and her mom comes along and she puts parental controls on it, so she sets up another one. Kids are quite good at staying one step ahead, so I think it's just a case of, rather than just outright banning, because that's not going to happen. So when they get to a certain age and they've got their own phones and they're out by themselves, you can't do that. So you just have to keep the lines of communication open, discuss the problems, discuss what's out there without lecturing. So like asking them, so have you ever seen anything that you don't like, and things like that. And there's lots of online support as well for things like that. I'm trying to think of, I think it might be Mind Mental Health Charity, or one of the mental health charities over here has got like advice on that, and there's quite a few. There's a government thing, and actually TikTok as well does parental support advice. And just keep open, educate yourself about it, so that if they do come to you with a problem, you actually know what the hell they're talking about.
And I guess it's another thing would be to keep them interested in something off screen. Because I think that's one of the most difficult things.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard. You don't want to preach it, you don't want to lecture. And I certainly don't. I'm a young adult author. I want them to read my books. I don't have teenagers. Mine are a bit younger. So yeah, call me in a few years' time, see what I'm saying.
Will do. And in your book, the friendships or the friendship deformed within the group, it turns sour, more or less, because it became all about being successful. And like Maxine said, they have become frenemies, friends, yet enemies. And you have to be careful not to cross the line, because it's not just your former friends you have to be aware of, but also the fan base.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes, I think it's not just about being friends, it's about being seen to be friends. Or being seen not to be friends. If, you get this culture, call out culture, in sort of the online world, where, if somebody who's supposedly your friend does something that's considered to be wrong, you have to either call them out on it and take a stand, or you have to take their side and dig in. So, it's very hard to stay neutral, which is what Maxine's trying to do with Zav, because Zav is tortured in his own special way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's not just about friendship, it's also about family. I mean, Maxine always calls her fan base family.
Yeah.
It's also a bit disturbing. I mean, I'm an adult. Maybe that's because I find it a bit disturbing that she calls her fan base. People, like you said before, think they know her, but they don't know her.
Yeah. And there is there is this relationship, I think, between influencers and their fans, certainly like between the younger influencers and their young fans. You know, I'm not talking the sort of 40-year-old mum influencers or anything, but, you know, the ones who are sort of in their 20s or under. There is this feeling of having grown up with them, and this feeling that you know them really well, and this feeling of ownership as well. So if you do something that displeases them, the fans will turn on you because, you know, they're really disappointed in you because they thought they knew who you were and they thought you wouldn't do this thing. And also it's a little bit touched by envy as well, I think, sometimes with some. I'm not saying all fans, obviously there's people who like influencers who are not like this at all. But the online discourse, the communities will, you know, the chat underneath the videos on YouTube or whatever will be like, well, you're being arrogant, or you're not grateful enough. We put you here. Thanks to us that you're successful. And you get all these freebies. So they do actually feel like, they own shares in you. Most. They've invested all their time and their love and their admiration into you, and therefore you owe them entertainment and, you know, friendship and support and whatever. And, you know, like you get Maxine, who sometimes is like panicking because she can't get back to all these people. You know, she gets people contacting her saying, I've got mental health issues and you're the only one who understands me. And she's not a counsellor, so she can't really help them. And I do think, you know, there's if the fan base is big enough, then there will be sort of people like that who just really are very over invested in your story.
I mean, they take it much more personal than is, let's say, healthy.
Yeah.
There's also, I also wonder about the problem of stalking, because a little bit, you touch a little bit upon this question, because I think Ethan, the one who was a huge fan of Seth, and he was also, I think, in his videos, and he lost his, I don't know, his hero, and then he feels the need to keep on going because that's all he knows, that's his life, and he starts following Maxine. And is this also something, do you think, young people underestimate as a danger? That people become so obsessed with you, the internet persona.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it's something that happens all the time, but there's certainly, one of the things about writing this story was that every time I thought I'd made up something really crazy that could never happen in real life, I'd like, you know, fire up my computer and there it was. So, you know, I was, the Dead Lucky, one of the things in Dead Lucky is there's these burn files of all this dirt that Zav has been collecting on other influencers that could damage their careers. And then it turned out that there was a couple of YouTubers in America who had, you know, allegedly, they both deny it, but, you know, had allegedly built up these files of secrets and dirt and stuff on other influencers. So that it's, you know, really, you never know what's going to happen. You really don't. And again, there was a case of another, I think this was a TikToker this time, who was getting too close to he was a straight man who was getting too close to some of his female fans. And, you know, so that was another thing that you sort of find out about with Ethan is, you know, what happens if you get too close to your fans and it sort of crosses the line into a relationship, and you know, it's another, it just happened.
Absolutely. And I also sometimes wonder, especially those who watch those videos, where is the line between reality and fiction, you know? I mean, where does it get blurred? Where do we keep the line? Do we still realize, or do these people
hope that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Might it be in this case a bit more difficult, because if you see a film, you know it's fictional, this person is just playing a character, but if it's like an influencer and doing videos, they more or less pose as themselves.
Yeah, but they are still playing a character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, when we get onto the subject of whether it could happen, I did actually put a disclaimer in the front of Dead Lucky, because I invented a platform called Play Me, because I didn't want to say it was YouTube or TikTok or any other, or Twitch or any of the other kind of video streaming platforms. And part of that was because I wanted the freedom to invent the technology myself. But the other part of that is because I did not want to get sued.
You never know.
Because, if you, I know one influencer / author that I know tried to unbox her books, because one of the fantastic things about being an author is they suddenly send you like a box of 20 of your books, and it's the most exciting thing you've ever got in the post. And she tried to unbox hers, because we do a nice video saying, look, here's my books. She unboxed hers with a Chinese carving knife, so it looks like a great big massive blade. And she just, she's Chinese, so she thought, I'll just use the knife from my kitchen. Look, undoes it, and then it got taken off of, I think, TikTok, because she's holding an enormous blade. So, actually the streaming platforms are quite good at detecting things like that, inappropriate content. So if somebody was going to try and dress up in a scary mask and kill somebody on camera and upload it, it really wouldn't probably last long enough for 3 million people to see it anymore, but it might have done a few years ago.
Okay, but I mean, which is funny. I mean, not funny, but strange.
Funny, peculiar.
Because I mean, you can also kill someone with a carpet knife.
Yeah, no, exactly. You can kill someone with a really heavy book, to be honest.
You can kill them with your bare hands.
Yes, exactly. Coffee table books are quite useful for this purpose.
If you can lift them.
Yeah, if you can lift them. Exactly. What I also found wonderful in your book was the fact that you used first-person narration for your characters, for Maxine and Sam.
Yeah.
And as a reader, I was always in their head. I was always there or on her shoulder, and it's a very intimate way of telling the story.
Young adult is almost all first person. I mean, there are some third person YAs, but first person is the most common. And I write in it because basically my background is that I worked in women's magazines, and I started off in what we used to call true life magazines, women's weeklies, really, really gritty stories, outlandish stories, crazy stories. And back in those days as well, we didn't have Zoom. We used to go and do a lot of interviews face to face. You'd sit on people's sofas and they'd describe to you how their husband had run off with their best friend, or how they had, taken violent revenge on somebody, or rubbed chili in somebody's underpants, or all sorts of. We did have that story one time. Yes, cheating husband. So I used to go and do all of these stories, and they were always written up in quite a rigid first-person house style. It was always chronological. You always started on a scene, and it was always first person. And I just got into the habit of writing first person, and to me it feels really stiff to write third person. I'm actually trying to write one in third at the moment, because that's what they've asked me to do. But it is a new challenge. But the thing that I found hardest in Dead Lucky was not so much the first person, it was writing. One of them is written in present tense and one of them is written in past. And I said to myself, I would never do that again. And I'm doing it again in the thing I'm writing at the moment. Because the times I read through it, and then like the proof came, the line edit came back, and there was still sometimes I was using the present in the, because when you're whipping through and you're editing, you're dipping in and out of chapters, you do get what tense you're writing.
And how did you manage to stay in line, to not get confused or mixed up? Are you a very strict planner then?
No, really not. Really not. I wish I could be. I've got a friend, hi Melissa Welliver, who plans absolutely amazing. She spends about like 3 or 4 months just planning. Everything is meted out, and then she just writes a book at high speed and just can produce it within sort of weeks. Because she knows exactly what she's doing. And obviously there's still things that surprise her, and there's still characters take on a life of their own and that sort of thing. But she generally knows exactly where it's going and exactly why. And I cannot do that without writing. So my way of figuring out what's going to happen, my way of planning, is writing a load of old rubbish and then see what happens.
What was, okay, you say or you're not planning, it happens while you write. What was the most surprising thing that happened in Dead Lucky or The Girl Who?
So The Girl Who, it's kind of interesting because, so there's a part of the book towards the end where Ellie and Leah, my characters, have to gate crash a party. And I knew by the end of this party that I wanted them not to be together. Not for any particular reason. I just wanted Leah to be off so she could go off and do something that was important for the plot. And I wanted Ellie not to be there when it was done. And that was a really weird experience where Ellie's character just took over. So I had made her this really fun-loving, outgoing, attention-seeking. She's got this really annoying habit where she's got a bottle of glitter in her pocket and she throws it over the place, all over the place. And then Leah's very self-contained and very self-aware, and she's, you know, because she's had people staring at her since she was a kid, and she's been through some really bad trauma, and she's still struggling to cope with it. And so the characters just took over. So Leah danced with a man for the first time in her life, or a boy, the first time in her life, and sort of had experienced this little flicker of normal life, which she's never had before. She's never been to a party before, like not a proper teenage or young adult party, because it's definitely not a teenage party. And Ellie has a really good time and just dances with people and makes a new friend who is the best guy in the whole world. He's called Guy. He's a guy called Guy. And she just goes on about it, and she just thinks it's absolutely hilarious, dances on the sofa, does a big crowd dive off of the sofa, and people catch her, and then she throws glitter over everyone. And then she goes, oh, hang on a minute, where's Leah? And all of that happened, and my agent said when she read it that, she was thinking, oh, come on, this is ridiculous, this would never happen. And then she thought, oh, no, actually it would. It's totally what Ellie would do. And it's like, I didn't know what to do with that, but then my characters just did their thing.
And in Dead Lucky, the most surprising thing that happened?
I had a lot, I was trying to say it without spoilers, I had a lot of thinking about the killer's motivation. And at the time I was writing it and editing it, I was also in the run-up to the launch of The Girl Who. And I was starting to think for the first time about being a public person. So not famous, obviously, but having a social media presence, being a spokesperson for my book, like interacting with people who might be readers and possibly young people who might be readers as well, although that doesn't happen so much. It was all the schools were closed. I couldn't do any school visits. But, just this idea of being a public person and being in the public eye and being looked at. And the motivation for the killer and me negotiating who I was as a public person sort of came together in the killer's motivation. Not that I've killed anyone. But just that feeling of like, why am I here? Why should I be in the limelight? Why am I special? That sort of fed into the killer's motivation in the end. And I actually handed the book in without knowing I hadn't fully nailed it. Went for a run because I used to do that in those days. And then I came back while I was on the run. I was like thinking about my thing and thinking about their thing. And it just sort of came together in my head. So that was a surprise.
Okay. That's how it works.
It's all about me, yeah.
I have an add-on question to before. You said that in young adult fiction, mostly it's written in the first person.
A lot of
why
it is,
is that?
I don't know. I think it's just because it's really intimate and immediate. I think so. I've my son's 9, so he's not in that age group at all. But he's recently been someone bought him an old Enid Blyton book, and he's been trying to read that, and he finds it really boring. And these are the books that kept me up all night, that I found so exciting and so full of adventure. But the way they were narrated is just old. And now I read them, I can see that myself. I can see it's chapter 4, nothing's happened. And, I think the narration's just moved on and young adult market is very hungry for new structures, new ways to experiment with storytelling. They like innovation. They like, and like the immediacy of first person, I think is one of those things that really, it catches people's imaginations more. But I've seen a lot of innovation in young adult fiction. There's quite a lot of, and they also obviously pioneering things like representation of different minorities and stuff like that. So it's a very exciting kind of space to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Also for us readers, I'm often wondering, also after reading your book, maybe adults should read more young adult books because the plots,
definitely.
yeah, absolutely, because the plots are so interesting and the way characters are built, let's call it that way. It's, or even if you have, let's say, fantasy or sci-fi, this whole world building is fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is assumption from some readers who only read adult books that YA books are somehow more simple, and that is really not the case.
No, it's not, absolutely.
Sometimes, I mean, in general, the word count is often slightly shorter, but although not in fantasy, sometimes fantasies, you could kill someone with some of those fantasy books. Not suggesting that you should, but you could.
Yes, you definitely could, absolutely.
But generally, they're shorter, like especially the thrillers tend to be like between 65 and 85,000 words, but they are, they certainly don't pull their punches. They're very, they're very good at attacking social issues head on.
Yep.
Although, sometimes authors can be bolder than publishers or whatever, but generally, there's a lot of enthusiasm for books that tackle social issues with the YA audience.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's a little bit like, I used to work for Cosmopolitan, and we used to pretend, when I was at Cosmo, there was quite a large proportion of the readers who were under 18, but we used to be writing for women in their 20s. And that was, when the woman you held in your head when you were writing your features, whose lifestyle you were trying to reflect. But then there were lots of teenagers who were buying it to see what life would be like in the 20s. And we used to have to pretend or like ignore those readers, and not pretend they didn't exist so much, but just de-emphasize those readers because that wasn't our target market. Whereas now I'm writing for young adults. The assumption is that we're writing for people of 13 to like 19, 20. And those people then go on nicely to read adult books when they're about 20. And that's so not the case.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, I don't actually know what the percentages are, but there's a significant percentage of young adult readers who are not just over 20, but over 25. And, I read young adults. I'm definitely over 25.
So am I. I mean, definitely.
Tiny bit.
Yeah, just a step over.
27, 28.
Yes, exactly.
Is it maybe because I have the feeling sometimes I don't know if it's the publisher or the authors, that they're more experimental and more brave in tackling some subjects they're writing about?
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of subject matter that, I think my theory is that there's a trickle down or trickle up, depending on how you look at it. But I'm going to go back to magazines again, sorry. But when I was working at Cosmo, I could see that Cosmo Girl used to be in the office next door to us. So they were supposed to cater for the teens that supposedly weren't reading Cosmo. And I could see that they were struggling for winning their readers, keeping their readers interested. And especially with online, because at that point, blogging was starting to explode a bit more. Social media wasn't in full flow at that point. But, kids were going online. Teenagers were going online to look for their entertainment much, much more. And I could see that those kids who weren't reading Cosmo Girl weren't going to suddenly get to 18 and go, I want to read Cosmo. Because, why would you, if you've not bought magazines, why would you suddenly start buying magazines? Some people will, obviously, but it's, if you've got all this other choice around, then you're not going to necessarily want to. So I could see that the magazines needed to fight to retain the interest of their readers. And that once the Cosmo Girl generation grew up, they probably wouldn't buy Cosmo. Once the Cosmo generation grew up, they weren't going to probably want to buy Good Housekeeping, and so on. And so, and I think it's the same with, their needs changed. And I think it's the same with book readers as well, is that their needs, that they are starting to look like the young adults are growing into adults. They're starting to read more adult fiction as well as YA fiction. And they want, we've had quite a few rom-coms now with single-sex couples or, with trans characters in the adult market. And we weren't really seeing that a few years ago. And more representation of disabilities as well, and different ethnic backgrounds and cultures. And I think that's speeding up from YA and from society in general as well, obviously. That's changing.
And what about the feedback from young adults, from your young readers? Or younger readers?
Oh, feedback from younger readers. I'd love that. No, I mean, the thing is that I launched both of my books in lockdown.
Okay. Yeah.
So I launched The Girl Who in 2021 and then Dead Lucky in January 2022. And both times bookshops were closed. And I mean, obviously the 2021 lockdown was more severe than the 22 one, but it was still lockdown. And I didn't have I had an online launch event rather. I didn't get to do book signings, because bookshops weren't doing them. Yeah. And I didn't get to do school visits until I did my first school visit last July. And it was just such a joy to actually meet young people and put the book into their hands. In fact, obviously none of them had read it because they all bought the book or not all of them, but some of them bought the book when they were there after hearing the speech. But I got some messages from some of them from that first school visit saying they'd read the book and they thought it was really good. And now they were going to go and read The Girl Who. And I cried. It was so lovely. It was so lovely, because you sort of, the weird thing about launching a book in lockdown and then, going through the whole process online is that you end up not, how do I put this? You end up not thinking it's real. Yeah. Even I didn't get to see my book in shops for about 4 months. I'd launched it out. My publishers gave me a lovely bunch of flowers. All my friends said yay on Twitter. And then it just felt like that was it. And then everyone moved on to the next launch. And then, you're just sitting there going, is anyone reading it? You just don't know.
So you'll have the full experience with the next book launch.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, I really hope so.
Definitely. So that also.
Well, you know what? That's what I said with book 2. I was like, yeah, book 1 launched in lockdown. There won't be a lockdown for book 2. There was a flipping lockdown.
I think you will be lucky with book 3.
And I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So, question is also, what would be your advice for other authors out there?
It sort of depends, whether you're talking about pre-published authors or published authors. But I think, my biggest advice really is stop worrying about whether what you're writing is any good, because it doesn't matter. I mean, it will matter at some stage. But if it doesn't exist, it can't be good or bad. And that's the problem I always have. I have this lovely shiny idea. And then as soon as I start to write it, I get a few thousand words in and I think, oh God, this is awful. Or, this isn't working out how I wanted it to. And my shiny idea has become not very good anymore. And so the temptation is just to sit and polish your shiny idea like Gollum in the cave. Go, if only I had the time, I'd have this best-selling novel.
My treasure.
And to push through that bit when you start thinking, this is really crap. God, what have I written? What bilge is this? And push through that. And then, you might end up with the end of your first draft, like the end of the first draft of the one I'm doing at the moment. I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely terrible. But at least I have a thing now.
Yeah.
It exists. It didn't exist before.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now you're talking about it. What's coming next? What can you share with us?
Yeah, it's really annoying. Publishing is really frustrating because I was hoping I'd be able to talk about it by the time I spoke to you. And I still am not able to talk about it. But all I can say is I'm writing. It's a crime story and it's for adults and it's a whodunit. And it is, again, quite twisty and a bit bonkers.
That's good.
You sounds good, definitely.
And when can we expect it?
or rather more information? Where can you share a bit more with your fan
I
base?
wish I knew.
Oh,
My fan base. I wish I knew when I could say. I think they want to finalise the cover, and I think maybe they want to see the draft too. I'm not sure. The draft is nearly finished. It's coming at the end of the month, and then we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, you'll definitely know something by the autumn.
Oh, okay.
You'll be the first to know.
Oh, good. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Yeah.
So to actually talk about it.
Yeah. Then you have to come on again, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly. Just say the word and we'll have you on again. So will you be then on a panel, do you think, at crime events, crime fiction events?
I would so love to go back to Crime Fest and be on a panel. I would just love it. I mean, I do hear a lot of crime writers say that it is quite hard to get on crime panels because, people are, they expect a certain crowd there every year. So I'm not sure whether I get on one or not. They certainly, like I talked to them last year because the girl who was nominated for the Crime Fest, or shortlisted for the Crime Fest YA award. So that's how I ended up there. It was very, very exciting.
Yeah,
even though I didn't win.
I think I've said it before when we met at Crime Fest. I think there should be a, category panel for young adults, crime or thriller writers.
I tried to talk them into it when I was there. And, if they're listening, then please do it. But I do understand, because the thing is, as soon as you start talking about young adults, you start talking about getting underage people to come to your venue, and that is a different issue entirely. It's safeguarding. It's they could wander into one of the gory panels where they're talking about evisceration or whatever. Then there's sort of like, I'm sure that the young adults attending would be absolutely fine with it, but it's once you've got underage people involved, I think you're better off doing it through schools and libraries and stuff like that. And that is something they haven't developed at most literary festivals at the moment. But hopefully will someday.
Adults, quite a lot of adults are also reading them. They could put young adult authors on the regular panels where they fit in. So just one young adult among the others.
It would be great. I think it would be fun to do that. And also, I have to say, like in some festival, it depends on the festival, I think, but Crime Fest, there was a lot of writers there, or aspiring crime writers. And I think it's nice. It would be nice to have, because there's some people that aspire to write YA crime, and I think it'd be nice to have that represented. But yeah, I mean, it is also quite, it's up to the organisers as to what they think is going to work with their regulars and their punters. So.
And Andreina, is there anything else you would like to share, or you would like our listeners to know?
I would like them to know that it isn't always easy being a published writer. It's your happy ending that you get your book published, and then you realise there's a whole load of other rejection ahead for you, and that it's really hard because there's a lot of you out there, and especially with YA, because YA readers don't buy online. So if you happen to launch a book, and I don't know if you've mentioned this before, when all the shops are closed, then it's really hard to get your book into the hands of your readers. And then it's hard to kind of prove yourself as a writer and get known. And like, you can only sell so much yourself individually by doing podcasts and talks and interview panels and shouting on social media. Your publisher handles a lot of the rest. So a lot of your success is in other people's hands. So it's really, really hard. But what I really want readers to know is it's still, or aspiring writers even to know, is it's still so much fun and it's such a joy. And at the moment I am writing full time, and I get to my desk and I can't wait to get to my desk on Monday morning. Which is not something I could say about anything I've ever done before. I mean, I enjoyed my old jobs, but yeah, it's making stuff up for a living is awesome.
Yeah, I can imagine that. You are the lucky one.
Yeah, I'm a
absolutely.
Dead lucky person.
You're absolutely the lucky one. And we're honored that you have made time for us.
Oh, I'm really grateful to be on here. I love this show.
Thank you. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here. It was a great pleasure.
It's great. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.